Hey everyone, welcome to the Psyched to Practice podcast, your one stop for practical and useful clinical information, masterful insights from experts in the field, and a guide to daily living. I'm Ray Christner, and with me,
Paul Wagner.
And Paul, today we're really going on a different venture than we've had before, and a little bit out of the necessarily clinical realm and entering the world of cybersecurity.
Yeah. And, I think this is a topic that, if you're reading the title or even just going to listen to this intro, probably, creates a little bit of anxiety and a little bit of angst, because it's something that we know is so important. Yet, I think myself as a clinician, I feel fairly techie, but there's a depth of cybersecurity that I'm out of my depth in. And so, it's that almost is then why it's so important.
Yeah, I agree. It's something that as a business owner, I've learned more about ongoing over the last few years. And as everyone will hear in our guest, he talks about, really around COVID time, it really kind of ramped up. And that's really when, we started paying a whole lot more attention to it and really kind of changed our whole system. So yeah, an important topic, definitely anxiety provoking, but also we know that there are solutions. So let me introduce kind of our guest. So Paul and I kind of have a relationship already with our guest today because he's the IT guy for both of our practices. So we've known him for a while, and you'll hear I've worked with Keith for, about 14 years now. So Keith Bell, he is the CEO and founder of MTS I.T Solutions, which is a cybersecurity and IT service that, they use the term cybersecurity first business, which is that they really are looking at that piece of it as kind of the front end, but then they provide a whole lot of other IT services as well. And like I said, Keith's been doing this work for us for a long time and has taught me a lot over the years. So glad we could share his information with everybody else.
And if I remember, I think, I know, we're talking about it here in Hanover, Pennsylvania, working with Keith, but, he's able to work with individuals across the country, if I'm remembering correctly.
Yeah. I think, he, the great part of doing things virtually. Yeah. He works with people in other states as well. And I know other practices, and he really, I think, kind of has a really good understanding of healthcare and mental health practices. And, it's why we secure his services, and, other practices do as well.
And with that, we hope you enjoy this practice in action episode. Cybersecurity needs to be a priority.
Well, Keith, welcome to the Psyched to Practice podcast. Great to have you on with us.
Yes, Ray. Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here tonight.
Yeah. So, it's kind of great. So I've known Keith for many years. He's been kind of my practice's IT guy for, I think, almost 14 years now. Keith, it's been quite a while.
Time flies, doesn't it?
That's right. That's right. And, This idea of kind of maybe a little different episode for us to really kind of just talk about the world of cybersecurity and basically how that affects mental health. So, Keith, I guess maybe just, Paul and I know you, but maybe tell us a little bit about your background and how you became a cybersecurity expert, and I guess focusing in the mental health world.
Yeah, so I guess my whole journey started back out of high school. I went to a technical school, and it was kind of broken up into, it was all about electronics. It was broken up into analog and digital, and communications and computers were part of some of the terms. And I'll be honest with you, out of all those terms, computers, I didn't like the most out of all of them. So it's funny that I wound up here. But so I went through that, got my associate's degree in electronics, and I had a neighbor who was a software developer at a large corporation based out of Baltimore. And he had approached me. He's like, well, now that you graduated, what are you going to do? I'm like, I have no idea. He said, well, we're hiring a temporary position to come load Windows 95 on 20 computers. I was like, well, sure, great. Nothing else to do, so let's go for it. So went down there, started working for that corporation, and loaded Windows 95 on the computers. And then they extended my contract. They actually wound up hiring me full time after a period of time. And they sent me out for all sorts of certifications and trainings, and I was able to get, pretty well versed into the field there. So from there, I moved on. I went and worked in teleradiology. So it was a really cool job, actually. I was out going up the top of all these different tower sites. We were mounting wireless radios with FCC licensed frequencies. For what we were doing is we had area hospitals that were, let's say you went to one of these hospitals and you needed a CT scan or an MRI of something. That image would ride this wireless network that we built to a hub where we had a bunch of radiologists sitting, and they would diagnose and dictate all the imagery that was coming in. So did that for a while. And that's kind of what spun me out to go out on my own. All these doctors that we had worked for had their own little private practices. So they would call me up like, hey, Keith, you want to help me out after hours? So that kind of spun off to where I finally went out on my own and we started MTS I.T Solutions. So fast forward to about 2019. That was right around the pandemic timeframe. That's when we really saw the need for protecting our clients better with cybersecurity. I mean, don't get me wrong, cybersecurity was a thing before then, but really right around the pandemic, that's when it kind of broke loose and we started seeing cyber attacks everywhere. So we knew that, we needed to step up our game. We needed to get, be on the bleeding edge of the technology to better protect our clients, especially in healthcare. Obviously you guys have a ton of PHI and PII that you keep for your clients. So we at that time turned into a cybersecurity focused MSP, and MSP is a managed service provider. So that's kind of how we got to the point where we realized that there's a definite need for cybersecurity within mental health and all healthcare and really all small to medium businesses all over the place. So that's kind of what triggered it for us. And it's kind of where we are today. So we're cybersecurity focused MSP today.
Yeah. So, it's I think this is a common term, but, maybe just for those who think they know what cybersecurity actually is, what all does that encompass? Like, how do you define what cybersecurity is?
Well, at the end of the day, it's all about protecting the company's digital assets. And it's also about protecting your customers and clients' sensitive data that you may have for them as well. So the approach to that is, we take a multi-layered approach to protecting organizations because, the hackers are always one step ahead of the good guys, right? So we do a defense in depth method where we have layers of security. If they're able to breach this first layer of security, we're going to be able to stop them at the next layer and the next layer and the next layer. So that's kind of our approach to protecting organizations. But overall, cybersecurity in itself is just being able to protect businesses' digital landscape. And that there's a whole myriad of things that need to be done to protect that. But some of the key things are, employee awareness training is huge because, we find today that the bulk of cyber attacks are coming from business email compromises. So, and these phishing attacks that are happening left and right, they're triggering ransomware and malware, infecting networks and taking them down. So, again, we can get further into some of those technical things that we need to do, but overall, cybersecurity is practicing good habits and making sure that we're protecting all the company's digital landscape.
So, I kind of, know this from our time together, but, as I've gotten more into understanding cybersecurity as a business owner and, really looking at kind of what we need to do ethically in mental health and as a psychologist, I think my initial impression was, this is something that big banks have to worry about, right? Like it's these big companies that are going to be hacked. That it's not really, I'm a little guy who really cares about what I have. But I learned from our time together that's really a misconception I think a lot of people had. And can you share a little bit about your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, and I agree with you 100%, right? It is a very common misconception. And we hear it all the time when we're approaching businesses to work with. They're like, I'm too small to get hacked. Well, you're not too small to get hacked. You're just too small to make the news. There's tons of hacks on small organizations all the time. Right. And I think of it like this. The way the hackers look at the smaller organizations, a lot of times in smaller organizations, there's just as much data to be ransomed. There's just as much money to be stolen. Well, maybe not as much money, but there's still a good bit of money to be stolen from these organizations. And the hackers know that these smaller organizations typically don't have the resources to put all the protections in place. So at the end of the day, they're an easier target than the Fortune 500s. And on top of that, the way the world is with being able to hack today, I mean, you don't need to be a rocket scientist to hack. I mean, you can go on the dark web and buy ransomware for $30. Like, kids can do this out of their basement. So it's very easy for the hackers to get a hold of these tools to try to breach these small organizations.
Yeah, and I mean, I think again, kind of in our field, last year with the United Healthcare hack that kind of happened, I think a lot of people started feeling the pain because a lot of people that accepted that insurance didn't get paid for a while. And there was a lot of those things that came into place. But I think, just in kind of the things that you and I have run through our business as far as just kind of checkups to see where our vulnerabilities were at. That was eye-opening. I mean, I'm glad you mentioned about the emails. I think that was the thing that probably threw me off the most when we started in this kind of venture or in our practice, was that our biggest vulnerability came from our own human error.
Yeah, it does. And these bad actors or hackers are getting very good at what they do. So there's a lot of social engineering attacks going on now. And social engineering involves the human component. So I have a quick story of a CPA firm that had contacted us about helping them out after they had been hacked. So their receptionist received an email from a bad actor acting as if he was new to the area and his business, he just relocated and they needed a new accountant. And they were wondering if they were accepting new clients. So, of course, the receptionist replies back, well, of course, we're accepting new clients. We'll just need this bit of information from you. And, then he replies back, okay, give me a couple days to get this together and I'll get it over to you and we can start moving forward. So at this time, he's building rapport, right? So this is the social engineering portion of it. So he's building rapport with the receptionist. And so fast forward a couple of days, he sends over a PDF that's supposed to have all of his information that she had asked for. Well, she opens up the PDF and it was infected with malware. Goes through, scans the entire network, finds what data it looks for. This company had spreadsheets of every single client's social security number, amongst other information of all their clients. So they called us, wanting us to help them get out of this situation, better protect them going forward. Fast forward to a couple weeks later, they call me up and this is really bad. We have clients calling us up now telling us that their tax returns have already been filed. So these bad actors got a hold of all this information, went ahead and filed erroneous tax returns and got all of their refund money sent to bank accounts where I don't know where. And so all these clients were pretty much, out of luck at this point. Now, supposedly, and I don't know the end result, but supposedly they were supposed to be able to work with the IRS to get their returns back. I don't know if it ever happened or not. But one of the big components here that I want to bring up is this CPA firm lost 40% of their client base after this breach. Not to mention the cost that they had to pay for, what do you call it? Drawing a blank here. Identity theft protection, identity protection. They had to pay for identity protection for the clients that were breached. They had to send out all the email notifications and mail notifications. They had to report to the state and the feds that they were breached, and so on and so forth. So it was a mess. It was very time consuming for the corporation, the CPA firm, and not to mention, as I said, they lost over 40% of their business. So the reputational damage in these breaches is huge. It can put companies under.
And, I have to imagine that that's something that, for mental health practices, the CPA firm and like losing that faith and that trust in the clients that they serve, as well as the community around them, I can imagine. But, so often when, individuals are coming, into the therapy setting, it's, at a really challenging point in their life. And so there's already a level of vulnerability that's needed. And so, I hear that any breach of that trust, even, if it's through some of these bad actors, kind of, I don't want to say it's not through, any fault, but it's because we're not aware. And so the lack of awareness and the lack of these premeditated steps to take the precautions then can lead to, such a irreparable damage that really then all of the legal mess that's going on behind the scenes.
Yeah, sure. I mean, and not to mention at this point, your clients are trusting you with their information now, and most of the folks you might be working with, as you mentioned, are in very vulnerable states, and now they have very personal information about them that's being leaked out there. And if it gets in the wrong hands, it could be thrown on social media, and it could really really change the lives of your clients. So it's very important that we protect that stuff for sure.
And so, Keith, I'm curious, for our listening base, in a variety of settings. And so what do you think are some of the, what are the maybe bare minimum pieces that regardless of, if it's a private practice owner, if it's someone who's in a group practice, or if it's someone who's in a larger, community-based mental health facility, provider, at the varying stages of support that are out there, what are the things that are relevant to all individuals in terms of cybersecurity that they can be mindful of to make sure that they're doing the best they can to help protect the clients and protecting that information?
We would always just start with the basics. And, it seems like it's so common now. It's heard so much over and over. You'd think most people are aware, but just start with the basics. Number one, strong passwords. We can't do, password 1, 2, 3, 4 anymore. Not utilizing the same passwords over and over. So, for example, a lot of folks come to us with the misconception of, well, all of my data is stored in the cloud. We don't even house it. It's not our problem. But what happened is once the investigation came to that breach and they realized that their system wasn't breached, your password was breached. That's how they got into their system and stole the data. So password reuse is huge. So let's say they got your password to your Target account or Walmart or whatever it was, and you used it also for your practice software where you're maintaining all your data. It's very easy to extract those passwords out of a computer. They're stored in clear text in your browsers. Anybody can get them within minutes if they gained access to your computer. So it's a very common misconception that just because your data is stored with your third-party provider that you're not liable in that breach. Multi-factor authentication. I think most platforms are requiring multi-factor authentication on everything. That's one very easy step that can be performed. And of course, encrypted communications, making sure that emails that contain any sensitive information are encrypted at some level. Regular software updates on your computer, just making sure they're patched. One of the first steps that we like to do when we work with new clients is we like to do a cybersecurity risk assessment, because they really don't know, nor do we, what they really need to protect until we come in and do a risk assessment. Once we do that assessment, we're able to determine, okay, this is where your strengths are, this is where your weaknesses are, and from there we're able to give a diagnosis and come up with a game plan to better protect your organizations. So, obviously, a lot of organizations may not have the capacity to do something and put these controls in place internally. That's when you guys could look to partner with a managed IT service provider like us at MTS I.T Solutions. That's something that we can do for folks. Or there's many others out there as well. But I would suggest maybe engaging with some sort of managed service provider to get a risk assessment to have you understand where your vulnerabilities are and where you need to patch things up.
Yeah, and I would say, as just someone who's gone through that process, again, I think it was, for me, pretty eye-opening just to be able to go, oh, wow, it was that easy to get this password. Or, I remember us going over the data and you're going like, wow, here's the passwords that are mostly used. And I'm like, how would you even get that? So, I think that security assessment, for me, it really helped me really kind of understand what that, where those vulnerabilities are. And, it led to us having, I think, a good conversation and consultation with then what those steps are. And, you mentioned a few things, Keith, but I just want to, those that are listening, we're going to put in the show notes some tips that Keith's group has put together. That's 15 ways to protect your business from a cyber attack. And, when you sent that sheet over, I was looking at it and going, yeah, okay, I can check off a good bit of these, which always feels really good. So, for those who are interested, and is this on your website as well, Keith? Like it's on our show notes, but is there a way they can access this through your website?
Yeah, yep. I'll provide that at the end of the show here today. But you can go to our website and find that as well. Correct.
Perfect.
Yeah, but I agree. The risk assessment is very eye-opening to folks. You don't know what you don't know, So until we get in there and do it, it can be a very eye-opening experience for folks. Some folks we find they take a little offense to it when they see it. Other folks are just like, oh wow, let's move forward right now and get something done. So.
Well, and to kind of piggyback off your story of the CPA firm, I think you and I've kind of chatted about these. We've seen that happen emails to our own practice where someone will contact us through, Psychology Today or some link that can get into our email. So we don't have necessarily our emails on our website, but there's a way to get us a contact information. And it'll be a simple thing that'll be something like, hey, I have a niece who needs an evaluation. And by the way, I'm going to pay for it, but let me pay up front for that. And it's like, after doing the cybersecurity training, I go, yeah, no, we're not going to do that. But it's interesting to notice that it happens in a CPA firm, but we see those as well, that there are bad actors out there that are just finding ways to get information. And now we're in a day and age where forms are emailed to people, and there's other ways that those are done digitally. It can be problematic. Yeah,
and on top of cyber awareness training, which is very important. Because as you mentioned, just doing some of the trainings that we provided, it kind of does open your eyes to things. But we put advanced controls for scanning of messages. We have very, very in-depth tools. We'll scan every single link, every single attachment in any of these emails come in before they can even land in your inbox. So we're finding now that a lot of places are linking you to sites that look identical. What you think to the naked eye looks identical to your normal Microsoft login. Well, the controls that we put in place to scan these emails coming in, they scan down to the pixel of colors of fonts and size of fonts and everything else, making sure that this is actually a legit Microsoft sign-in page or not. It's wow. It's pretty in depth how granular we get with this. It'll go through a sandboxing process. It'll run through multiple virus tools to make sure everything's good. So having a very strong phishing and anti-spam filter on your email can help weed out a lot of that stuff. Again, it's not 100%. Nothing is, unfortunately. So that's why that in addition to cyber awareness training can really help protect your organization overall.
And, going back to like some of those, like just the general, almost like kind of the bare minimum things that individuals can do. Like I couldn't help but think, but so many of those, it doesn't take a lot of effort to go and do and set up. But it is a hassle. But if we can work to kind of be just aware of the importance and what that's really protecting ourselves from, as well as building it into a routine, we can really help to integrate it. And, I think a lot of the, when you're talking about the password generators, the multi-factor authentication, those are out there to help create a more seamless and streamlined, but it does have to be an extra layer. And an extra layer does mean there is some deviating from what we're typically doing, but really just trying to recognize and embracing that and saying, okay, I might need to remember to have my phone handy for that multi-factor authentication. But once I'm getting in the habit of that, it becomes just the same as we would typically like, I have a password saved in Google or whatever that may be. It's just now a different layer of protection that's there. So wanting to encourage the individuals that, as we're talking about these things, really kind of recognizing when we're, encouraging taking some of these steps, it's not just about, it's not a one and done thing, but rather we put something in place, we adapt to it. In the same way, we really try to encourage that for our clients as well. And it's, it's almost kind of that when we're talking about psychoeducation in the setting or in the sessions, this is, a cyber education, and it's just as important to understand the basics and understand the process behind it.
I was going to say, and to Paul's point, it's, we struggle with that as well, because as you mentioned, when we put in additional controls in place, it does change your normal workflow. It does add a couple of other steps. So we have to find a happy medium to where we're adequately protecting your organization without inhibiting normal workflows and slowing down normal workflows. So it's a very fine line of, protection versus convenience. And we need to, make sure that we hover right around that line to where it's not making it so it's almost impossible to do your job, but we still remain secure at the same time. And go ahead.
Guys, I think just to kind of piggyback on that. I mean, I remember like when we first really went into, especially around the password issue, the initial startup was a little bit, it was rocky in the sense of I'm like, oh my gosh, I got to, do all of these steps. But then, once you get a couple weeks into it, no different. In fact, I mean, sometimes I even think it's faster now that we're used to it. But it's just a learning curve. I mean, I think that's what people, I think if we would have had this interview the first week that we did that, I would probably been swearing at you at this point, Keith. But after a week's practice and you kind of go into it, it's kind of second nature now. And I mean, I think that's the important thing. And I'm glad Paul brought that up because, when we change from it, we think it's going to be more difficult. But it's just, I love our password program that gives these unique passwords, and it's now not hard to do. I don't know if I loved it day one, but it's so easy. I actually think I never forget my passwords anymore because I have the assistance of it. Which is why I think it's great. Now, if I ever lose the access to that program, I'm in trouble, but I do like it.
We got you covered, Ray. That's right. We can get you back in. No worries.
That's right. That's why we got you here, man.
Yeah. So, I mean, one of the great things about it, and we're talking about encrypted password keepers, and I don't even know any of my passwords anymore. I have these long 20-character cryptic passwords for everything. Yeah. I don't even know what they are. The password generators just generate it for us, and they're completely encrypted with multi-level levels of multi-factor authentication, making them very secure. And even if they were hacked on the back end, it's still pretty much impossible to get to that data. Now, as opposed to storing your passwords in your web browser, they're all clear text. They're very easily extracted. And it just comes out like a notepad file and you can see everything. But one of the big things that we like, especially in this day and age with everything's multi-factor authentication. And we find 9 times out of 10, a lot of companies are using some sort of shared account to get into something. Well, with these password keepers that we use, we can share records with each other, and we can actually keep the multi-factor authentication codes in the records of these password keepers. So it's not like, we're trying to log into a shared account and, the 2-factor authentication is going to Ray's phone and you're running around the office looking for Ray to get the code, or Ray's out of the office. So, it really streamlines a lot of things where we have shared access to certain accounts like that. So there's a lot of great things about it. And there's password generators as well. We also have features where we can put in breach watch. So it'll let you know if that password's been breached on the dark web, and it'll alert you to give it a change. So.
Yeah. That's. I'm glad you brought the shared piece up. That's actually, kind of a game changer, because we've had that. When where one of us, it would come to our cell phone. I'm in the middle of a session. Somebody needs the password, and now since we've set that up, it's made it such a seamless process. And again, front end probably a little bit more work, but then I don't think anybody ever asks me for a code anymore. And I think we have it to a point where it's running that smooth. So that's a great point to bring up.
Yeah, there's a bit of a learning curve in getting used to it, but that's life. People just tend to not like change, but like you said, once you got through a week or two, you actually wound up liking it better. That's we see that a lot. So, and as well as just the same as when we work with you, we're here for you to help you through the problems as you arise, and get you through it, and keep you moving forward.
That's right.
And Keith, I think that piece about change that you just said is so important, because I think that can be such a barrier to interacting with these pieces. It's like, I don't have the time to commit to taking this step, or, I'm so busy, I don't want to add just one more thing. And, we go through constant changes, when, different updates to our operating systems or changing layout, and we adjust and we adapt. But because this one's more of a willful step, we have to actually go and engage with this change. It feels like it's just that much more of a hurdle. But if we really think, the learning curve of going to different operating systems, and, personally at home, I enjoy using a Mac, here at the office, we use Windows, and, there's a learning curve, even just my copy paste prompt is different, and the keyboard layout is different. But once we go and we willfully engage back and forth, we're adapting and we're better able to find that middle ground. And so I'd encourage, again, any individuals that are maybe yeah, I know I'm supposed to do that, but, I'll get to it. Try to make it that willful change that we're working to take, because it is such an important step, and you're really only investing in your own security. And that way we're not waiting until there has been that breach, and then you're getting that phone call of, hey, can we work to set this up? Because yikes, this just happened to us. And instead, hopefully these individuals are never having to make that call because they've taken these preventative steps.
Yeah, absolutely. We work with small, medium business owners all the time. And it's like, if you just kind of take your head out of the sand and really open your eyes up to what's going on. All it takes is one employee, one email to cripple the business that you've worked your entire life to build. So taking a little bit of time up front to, have a risk assessment done, put some controls in place, give yourself some peace of mind that you're doing, even just a little bit to start protecting your organization, to protect what you've worked so hard for. You've sacrificed going to your children's soccer games, working late, all sorts of things you've sacrificed all your life to build this business can be taken from you in an instant with a single email. So it's really important. And I think today more people are becoming aware and really paying attention a little better, but it's been a struggle for the past few years to get folks to really take this seriously. But I think it's becoming more prominent in people's minds now, and people are starting to take it more seriously, and they're thinking about it more, but they may not be taking action yet.
Yeah. Keith, we've talked a little bit about email as being kind of one of the cyber threats that we have. But I guess for those, listening that are in the mental health field, are there other cyber threats specific to mental health that our listeners should kind of be also aware of?
Oh, sure. There's tons of different threats out there. Now, I wouldn't say necessarily specific to mental health. But overall, I mean, there's all sorts of ways for the hackers to get into your systems. Drive-by downloads on websites. You can go to websites that are infected and they start popping up. You need to do this. You need to click on this, and people take the bait and they click in. There's brute force attacks where they can just come in and they just start trying to, hammer your system to find out where there's a hole. So, if, for example, if you don't have, your Microsoft Windows operating system patched and up to date, if you don't have, your Zoom patched and up to date, or all these different third-party applications that are vulnerabilities out there. There's many ways to get into your system specifically, not to mention the email side of things. Now, with everything moving to the cloud, there's ways of breaking into your cloud application, being like, say, we're your Microsoft 365 tenant. We're housing tons of data in OneDrive and SharePoint now, so that's it's a very easy way to hack in as well. So, yeah, I mean, but specifically to mental health, I think the attack vectors, the attack methods are the same no matter what industry you're in. But with mental health itself, obviously healthcare in general, you really have to worry about protecting the PHI and trying best practice to be HIPAA compliant, because if you get breached, you're going to get hit with some pretty hefty fines. Now, we talk with a lot of healthcare professionals. They're like, HIPAA, whatever. There's no HIPAA police ever came and knocked on my door, but you're going to hear from them when there's a breach, and there's pretty hefty fines for not doing your due diligence to protect your clients and your patients' data. So I'd say that's more specific to the healthcare and mental health industry.
So now we scared everybody, and we have we've created this world of anxiety in listeners. I guess maybe as we're kind of getting to the end here, when we're looking at smaller practices. So I know big organizations have a little bit greater capabilities, but smaller practices, a lot of times we're on limited budgets. Not as many resources. What do you think those smaller practices, what can they do to kind of implement some effective strategies or effective measures starting out?
Yeah, I mean, what kind of goes back to our basic stuff, like we talked about earlier, just making sure you have strong passwords, making sure you have multi-factor authentication, making sure your devices are encrypted, your hard drives are encrypted, and encrypted communications via email. So, I mean, they're the very, very basic things that you need to do. Now, we've actually put together some packages for protecting organizations where we have kind of a basics, an advanced, and an elite. So, the basics are going to cover your basics. Like it states, it's not going to be a full-fledged everything all-in-one tool to protect all aspects of it, but it's going to be a starting point. It's something that you can do now to get started, to show that you are doing your due diligence, you are doing something to protect within your budgetary constraints, right? So if you're just not doing anything and you get breached, then you're most likely going to take some pretty hefty fines. But if they can see that you're taking a proactive approach and you're doing what you can do within your budget, they're going to be more lenient on you, I would think. I have no proof of that, but that's the kind of the conception amongst the industry. So, if nothing else, at least reach out to an MSP to get a quote, to talk to them about maybe getting a risk assessment, kind of seeing what that would look like, what the cost would be to have somebody manage and monitor this for you. So, when we get up into the elite packages, we have 24/7 eyes running on your systems, monitoring all day long. So a lot of breaches happen after hours, holidays, weekends, when they know there's nobody sitting there monitoring the systems. So we have 24/7 monitoring going to a security operations center that's kind of monitoring all this metadata going back and forth across your platforms. And when there's anomalies in this data, it pings alerts, and we have a team of engineers ready to respond. And we can immediately isolate the machine that is having the issue that's throwing these alerts. And by isolating that machine, we can kind of stop the bleeding per se of the attack, and maybe isolate it to one device before it goes and infects the entire network across your organization. So I would say, kind of key takeaways for the basic things you can do. Again, strong passwords, multi-factor authentication, encrypted communications, and encrypted data.
And I can personally speak to that because there was a time when I was on vacation out of the country and I pulled up my work email and I immediately got locked out of everything. And then I think I even got a text message from looks like someone's trying to hack in, or looks like someone's trying to access this from out of the country. And so, I mean, it was seconds it took. And so, and that thankfully able to be resolved pretty quickly. And then, just had to get the heads up like, oh, hey, yeah, no, that was truly me, and verifying that. But once that happened, I had access back immediately too. And so, I got locked out, but also locked back.
What we call
back in.
Conditional access policies. Yeah. We'll block logins from out of the country because, we see, I'd say 70% of the attacks coming from overseas and out of the U.S. Now, some of the bad actors are smart and they get behind a VPN to make them appear as if they're in the U.S. But that, having that conditional access policy in place in itself cuts out 70% of the attempts. So. And then we also have controls in place if we notice there's what we call impossible travel. So if Paul logged in Hanover, Pennsylvania 10 minutes ago and he just logged in Tampa, Florida 5 minutes later, that's probably not likely that happened. Our systems will alert us on that, automatically disable your account, sign you out. And that's part of where we call DLPs, as a data loss prevention. So maybe somebody's gotten to your SharePoint, your OneDrive, and they're starting to download a bunch of information from your account. Well, we're going to immediately recognize that, be able to shut them down and stop the bleeding of that breach. So.
Yeah, I'm glad that was brought up. Yeah, I think, again, with my kind of life, I travel a lot and have my laptop with me. I usually am doing some work from somewhere. And I think that's just another big asset that we've had, is to be able, when we're traveling, if we're on a network in a hotel, it's not going to be as secure, and making sure that we have the right, things in place to ensure that, we're keeping everything as safe no matter what. Like, I don't think we always think about that. It's like, we're going to a coffee shop and we're going to pop up our laptop and join Starbucks Wi-Fi. But that's a whole other level of risk that, having these things in place. I don't want to say I don't think about it now, but I know that we have the things in place that I don't have to worry about it now. If that makes sense.
Yes. That's what, so for when you're roaming and traveling like that, that's where we have that SASE client on your computer, which is it's kind of like a next generation VPN, but it puts you in a private cloud and it creates what we call a zero trust networking environment. So nobody else in that Starbucks coffee shop is going to be able to scan and ping your machine to see if they can get into it, because you're protected behind a private cloud firewall in a zero trust atmosphere. So it really helps cut down the possibility.
So Keith, as we're wrapping up, is there any other kind of things you would kind of want to just throw out to our audience of takeaways from that they just should start thinking about at this point before as they're trying to consider their next steps?
Yeah. So, obviously don't ignore this. It's a real threat. It's something, if you care about your business, if you want to keep your doors open, you need to pay attention to this in some fashion. You need to take some steps to starting to protect your organization's data. I highly recommend reaching out to an MSP to maybe do a risk assessment for them to see where their strengths and weaknesses are, and just have an understanding of where you need to patch things up. Now, we can do a risk assessment for organizations, and we'll tell them where their weaknesses are and tell them what they need to do. And, we'll give them a blueprint of what they need to do. And if they have the manpower to do it themselves or don't have the budget and resources to hire us, we're happy to give you a blueprint and tell you, hey, this is what you need to do. Now, if you don't have the resources or time or want to do it on your own, obviously a company like MTS, we can do it for you. So I'd say one of the key takeaways is put some of the basic controls in place: strong passwords, multi-factor authentication. Reach out to a professional IT firm and look to having a risk assessment done to really wrap your head around what you need to protect and what you can do.
Great. Well, Keith, thanks for that. And I just want to throw out to the listeners, as Psyched to Practice is kind of moving forward to do some continuing education programs, Keith and I are going to be teaming up here at some point in the near future to do an ethics in cybersecurity and look at it not only what we need to do professionally, ethically, but then Keith sharing some more specific tips that are going to be able to be actionable steps that you all can take a look at. So keep an eye out for that. So,
yeah, I'm looking forward to working together on that, Ray.
Yeah, me too.
And again, thank you so much, Keith, for taking the time this evening. And, and if our listeners are interested in, kind of hearing more or even being able to kind of go and checking things out, like what are those websites or what are those social medias that they're able to kind of follow and get some more information from?
Yeah, sure. Our website is going to be www.MTS-ITS. That stands for MTS I.T Solutions. It's MTSITS.com. And you can also search for us on Facebook and LinkedIn under MTS I.T Solutions as well. And then, as Ray had mentioned, I think Ray's going to put a leave behind here. We have a 15 ways to protect your business flyer that we're going to leave behind for you guys. You want to take a look at that. It kind of gives you a breakdown of 15 things that you can do on your own, or 15 things that you can hire somebody to do for you. That'll be very good steps to protecting your businesses.
And just say, I really hope our listeners take this seriously. You were talking about Starbucks earlier, and I couldn't help but think of we wouldn't hold our sessions in a Starbucks. And so, make sure we're protecting the data in the same way we take those steps physically. Just because we can't see it, it is still there. And so I hope that they take that opportunity to go and check out the website and, being able to help bring some security to their own practices. And if you're interested in hearing more and staying up to date with what's going on to Psyched to Practice, you can visit our website at www.psychedtopractice.com and follow us on all major social media. By searching Psyched to Practice. We'll be back in 2 weeks, but until then, be well, stay psyched. The information contained in this podcast and on the Psyched to Practice website is intended for informational and educational purposes only. Nothing in this podcast or on the website is intended to be a substitute for professional, psychological, psychiatric, educational, or medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Please note that no professional patient relationship is formed here, and similarly, no supervisory or consultative relationship is formed between the host, guests, and listeners of this podcast. If you need the qualified advice of a mental health professional or practitioner, please contact services in your area. Similarly, if you need supervision on clinical matters, please locate a supervisor with experience to fit your professional needs.